Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Bible study today. We are picking up at the tail end of chapter 29, verse 31, and we will go through chapter 30 today, all 43 verses. As you see on your table, and I'll probably put it up on the screen for our video. We have Jacob's family, and if you're a visual learner, this might help you keep track of what is going on today, because a lot of children are going to be born, right? The tribes of Israel are going to be named, and the drama around that, I suppose, is going to be our focus today. Again, we find ourselves knee deep in drama, but also waist deep in God's blessings of keeping His promise to His people. So I think we'll read through the text and then we'll look at our worksheet with the reflections and the notes and talk about them. So we'll go in that order today. And I'm looking at quite a few verses. So I could start off, but who could I hand it off to at some point?
I'll take it.
Wayne will read, all right. And Sharon, okay, so I'll go until I get tired and I'll pass it off to Wayne. And then Wayne will have you pass off to Sharon at some point too. So, all right. Jacob's children. When the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, He opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, "It is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now." She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "Because the Lord heard that I am not loved, He gave me this one too." So she named him Simeon. Again she conceived, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "Now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons." So he was named Levi. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "This time I will praise the Lord." So she named him Judah. Then she stopped having children. I'll pause there for a second, and just maybe if someone hasn't been in our class for a bit or just picking up on our lesson today, why is Leah so insecure? You know, she thinks she has to have children to be loved by her husband. Yeah, Susan?
Jacob is probably making it known that Rachel is his first love.
All right, so he's still sticking around for Rachel, isn't he? Right? He's married to both of them, but the reason he's working 7 more years is for Rachel. So Leah, the sister, feels like she's, the forgotten one, maybe, right?
Yeah.
So now if she can have some children, well, maybe she can feel loved like her sister, if not more. Well, what does Rachel do? Wayne, we'll pass it off to you for some time here.
Genesis 30 verse 1. When Rachel saw that she was bearing no children for Jacob, Rachel was jealous of her sister. She said to Jacob, "Give me children or else I will die." Jacob's anger burned against Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you fruit from your womb?" She said, "Here is my maid Bilhah. Go to her, so that she may bear a child for me, and my family will be built up through her." So she gave her servant girl Bilhah to Jacob as a wife, and he went to her. Bilhah conceived and gave birth to a son for Jacob. Rachel said, "God has judged in my favor. He heard my voice and has given me a son." Therefore she named him Dan. Bilhah, Rachel's servant girl, conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Rachel said, "I have had a desperate struggle with my sister, and I won." So she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she was no longer bearing sons, she took her servant girl Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Zilpah, Leah's servant girl, bore Jacob a son. Leah said, "How fortunate!" So she named him Gad. Zilpah, Leah's servant girl, bore a second son for Jacob. Leah said, "I am blessed, for women will call me blessed." He named him Asher. At the time of the wheat harvest, Reuben went out and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." She said to her, "Isn't it bad enough you've taken away my husband? Do you want to take away my son's mandrakes as well?" Rachel said, "He will sleep with you tonight for your son's mandrakes." When Jacob came in from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come to me, because I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he slept with her that night. God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Leah said, "God has given me the wages I deserve, because I gave him my servant girl to my husband." So she named him Isaac. I'll stop, I guess.
And Leah conceived again, and she bore Jacob a sixth son. And Leah said, "God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will honor me because I have borne him 6 sons." So she called his name Zebulun. Afterward she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. She conceived, bore a son, and said, "God has taken away my reproach." And she called his name Joseph, saying, "May the Lord add to me another son." Continue, or do you want to?
Let's pause there. Yeah. So we are up to 11 sons, right? By my counts. Yeah. Well, she named him, verse 29. Notice that all the males are named in relation to some thought, event, or emotion that the mother felt when she bore that child. So, man, it kind of breaks your heart, to see her emotions really just on display here. Jacob is not able to manage his family well because it's not a godly planned family, right? He's got a polygamous household here, and so the ladies are struggling. He sounds like a pinball, right? He doesn't know which tent he's going to sleep in, and if he doesn't sleep in the right tent, he's in trouble. Yeah. Well, polygamous marriages, notes there, were accepted in those days. That does not mean they were part of God's original plan. This chapter shows some of the problems that are inevitable in such marriages. So, verse 30, verse 1, give me children or I'll die. That was what Rachel has said that, I believe. Yeah. Yes, this is one example of Rachel's spiritual immaturity. She thinking death like a Japanese sword? No, I probably not. Just die on the inside, perhaps, right? Not a suicide per se, but yeah, she really wants her child. She wants him to try with her more. Of course, her answer is Bilhah, and we found out about Bilhah earlier. Her dad gave Rachel Bilhah and Leah Zilpah, and so we have the servant girls who can become pregnant, and they do, kind of in rivalry to each other, and not good. Verse 14, another note there, we have the mandrake plants. So the mandrake plant was thought to promote fertility. So God doesn't need to prescribe fertility drugs, but here he chose to work through one to accomplish his will. I think the editor of this study and the People's Bible disagree on the mandrakes, and I think it is an open question. Did the mandrakes help Rachel? It's superstitious, maybe at best, right? I don't think anybody even has scientifically proven mandrakes to be a proven cure or something for infertility, but yeah. So again, we have a little bit of superstition in our text today. We have a bit of not God blessing sinful behavior, but tolerating it, shall we say, and working through it nonetheless. So that's where I wanted to pause and have you guys reflect and give some thoughts. Adrian has a comment.
So this is fiction reading, but I've read some fiction stories about this kind of time and things like that. But a lot of the focus was on what women's roles were back then and how they don't have a role other than being a mom to sons. So that was kind of like it's different than our culture now. They can't just go out and get a job. So a lot of their worth as a woman was to bear sons. And so that's what kind of is the stem and the root of a lot of these problems, is because they don't feel worthy, or they feel like they're valuable because they're not bearing sons for their husband, who owns a lot of wealth and needs the sons to manage the wealth and the land and have descendants to carry on the family name. So that kind of lies on the woman. So I know that's not biblical, it's fictional, but it was probably culturally more accurate to help paint a more well-rounded picture of what the women's roles were at the time versus now.
Right. So where would we date Jacob's family? Something around 1200 BC. I don't know if it could skew me a little bit one way or the other there. But how long is that the thought in culture? I mean, even King Henry VIII wanted a son. And that's another, almost 3,000 years later. So this thought is very much valid for a long time. And yeah, and they say God is, God has punished them, or God has closed their womb, and God has opened their wombs. And in this case, we do have that language that it does say God does open. He opened Leah's womb. He will open Rachel's womb. And so not only do they think I'm letting my husband down, but God is not pleased with me too, right? So, presumably, if Jacob had his way, he would have had children with Rachel, and I don't know. Maybe that would have been it. But certainly, I don't think the servant girls were part of anybody's plan. If Leah and Rachel had been as fertile as they wanted to be. Can you take a moment?
Excuse me a minute, please.
Sure. Other comments or thoughts? One other thing I thought of too is we have a bunch of boys mentioned, but that doesn't mean they were batting 100% every child that was born was a boy. We'll see here in just a moment that a lady, a sister, is mentioned, but there's probably going to be reason for that, because she's kind of going to get raped in a later chapter, and but for now, yeah, we have the sons recorded, which again just solidifies the point that the boys were more important, keeping the family line and such alive. So, any other thoughts or comments? Well, let's look at the flocks increasing then. Chapter 25, and and verse 25 and following. So, is Sharon still good to keep rolling, or
Sure.
you can pass it off to me if you'd like? That's fine too.
As soon as Rachel had born Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away that I may go to my own home and country. Give me my wives and my children, whom I have served you, that I may go, for you know the service that I have given you." Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages, and I will give it." Jacob said to him, "You yourself know how I have served you and how your livestock has fared with me. For you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I turned. But now, when shall I provide for my own household also?" He said, "What shall I give you?" Jacob said, "You shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again pasture your flock and keep it. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep, and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and they shall be my wages. So my honesty will answer for me later when you come to look into my wages with you. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and black among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen." Laban said, "Good, let it be as you have said." But that day Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white on it, and every lamb that was black, and put them in charge of his sons. And he set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob. And Jacob pastured the rest of Laban's flock. And Jacob took fresh sticks of poplar and almond and plane trees, and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the sticks. He set the sticks that he had peeled in front of the flocks of the troughs, that is, the watering places where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the sticks, and so the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped, and all the black in the flock of Laban. He put his own droves apart, and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob would lay the sticks in the troughs before the eyes of the flock, that they might breed among the sticks. But for the feebler of the flock he would not lay them there. So the feebler would be Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants and male servants, and camels and donkeys.
All right, so just talked about mandrakes and fertility. Now we have sticks and spotted animals. What do you make of that? Let's talk about it.
Sounds like you have two deceivers playing a game against each other.
Yeah,
Who could
Punch,
outsmart the
counter
other?
punch.
yeah,
Punch, counter punch. Yeah.
all sorts of cultural and superstitious things happening here.
American breeders in Madison would have enjoyed that.
Yeah. Well, I know the main point isn't lost on us, and that should be the fact that when Jacob makes this deal with his father-in-law, he really makes a bad deal for himself, right? This is like every time I roll the dice, anytime I get snake eyes or double sixes, I get paid. Every time it's something else, it's you get paid. You win. And so this was not a situation where he should have come out smelling good, right? He shouldn't. The odds are terribly stacked against him, and Laban is probably chuckling underneath his breath, thinking, "I got 14 years out of this kid, and now he's gonna pay me 80% of his wages going forward. So not a bad deal for me." So Does it work out that way? Obviously not. God is blessing Jacob and wanting his family to become stronger and prosperous. So, you know, he is at the breeding ground here, and boy, these animals that should not be appearing are appearing, and they are the ones that are stronger when that would not typically be the case. So, but yeah, it's but at some point it's a believer kind of carrying around a rabbit's foot or something here with these sticks that are quote unquote helping him. Joan, you have some wisdom here. You can.
Well,
Sure.
I'm thinking that there probably was some type of a chemical in those branches that when they peeled it, it got exposed, and they put it in the water, and they drained that, and it probably caused some sort of dye to manifest itself.
Well, again, I mean.
Why else would he peel the branches?
Right. I mean, could God have used this mandrake or those sticks to accomplish His will? I don't know. I don't come away wanting to fight that fight too strongly. I do want to say, yeah, I guess I said what I wanted to say about that, but yeah, it is, you know,
Superstition.
I do think, you know, do we see God blessing people when they're not earning or deserving it? Most definitely. Why is Rachel trying to buy mandrakes? Why isn't she praying? You know, and why does he have to do this with these peeled sticks? Why isn't he just praying to God? Give me spotted animals and, you know, dark colored goats. And it does seem like they're trying to help God out, you know, and the ladies too. They've been trying to help God out and help themselves out by, you know, here's my maidservant. And so again, God either uses it or he lets them be blessed even despite themselves. We're kind of leave it all as truth there, I suppose. But yeah, I don't think people really want to touch this and really defend it too much. Verse 27 there, the look section, we didn't talk about that yet. So it said, Laban had kept Jacob from going back to his family in Canaan. He saw that God had blessed him for Jacob's sake. All right, so that was the divination part, remember, right? He's like, I had a divination that I'm blessed because of you. So what's Laban doing? I mean, is he, you know, looking at a goat entrails or something? I don't know what divination necessarily means there, but he didn't say I had a dream, right? That would have been more optimistic. You know, God came to me in a dream and said, I'm blessed because of you. So Laban is a man of his culture too. Wayne, you have a thought on that or something?
Well, I just Googled mandrakes and the picture of the roots. They literally look like could be of a child. Arms, it's got two arms, legs, and the root would be like a turnip root or a big sugar beet if you're from Michigan. But it looks actually like a face too.
Yeah, it's definitely.
It's
They
amazing.
look like little Mr. Potato Heads from here. Yeah, that's really neat. So you could see the superstition taking root on that, right?
Taking root, that's a good. You're quick, Pastor.
Yeah.
It's
Poet and don't
amazing.
even know it. So so interestingly enough, but yeah, so there's again, so that was like I think that's the third strike. We have mandrakes, we got sticks, and we got divination here. All right, well Jacob named his wages, which humanly speaking would not amount to much. The sheep and the goats would be few and flawed. Yet Jacob had a plan. Although his plan was clever, he was open and Above board about it, he took a completely unscientific approach to fostering the developments of striped and speckled animals. Whether Jacob considered this good science or not, he left the outcome in God's hands, and God blessed him richly. So maybe the best you want to spin this is, this is his fleece, right? That he lays out on the ground. If it's wet, and if it's dry, he wouldn't expect it. Did God tell him to do this? Is it a sign of faith? Again, we're not told. I hope it is. God said to do this and trust me, but again, yeah, we're trying to answer questions we don't have information for. So, Al, have a thought?
Yeah, it's almost like Jacob is playing, cards, and he puts his cards right out and everybody sees what his cards are, right? I mean, he's not a real good poker player.
Well, he's smart though. I mean, he's put himself 3 days apart from Laban and his flock, so there's no confusion on this. You would definitely say Laban is getting a little greedy here, right? He's taking advantage of God and the promise, and God is going to stop this. His gravy train is going to end by having Jacob around. So, I like that thought. I like that God is not going to let Laban live in the penthouse off of Jacob's labor and the promise of the Savior. So, yeah. So, well, discuss. Note all the names were in some way related to a struggle between Rachel and Leah and their desire to have Jacob's love. It is sad that so much trouble came into the life of the patriarch. How did the struggles between Jacob's wives parallel Jacob's own life? And what may the Lord have been trying to teach him? So how is this kind of like his previous life before marriage? Susan?
Well, he came from a divided family. The mother loved Jacob and the father loved Esau. And Jacob was the younger of the two, and he was the one with the blessing. So it was a divided, dysfunctional family.
Yeah, he came from.
Divided dysfunctional family.
So, of all the people that should have maybe learned or noticed that, when your love is not fair and proportionate as it should be, you have a problem in the family. He did not do a good job of loving his wives and keeping them in harmony with each other. Right? So,
God really wasn't first in either father or mother in these instances. God wasn't first in their lives. That we're sinners, we mess up. And I think that's just a perfect example of it. They really didn't put God first. They didn't trust him like they should have. And that follows down through the generations.
yeah, I mean, definitely when you think of the patriarchs and you think of Abraham, left his country and he was going to sacrifice Isaac. And, he really was holding on to the promise. And then Isaac, you would say, really taught his family about the blessing, and the blessing was like first and foremost, you need to bless my son. We're taking a step down almost each time with the next generation about how much God is a priority, right? Because these wives aren't trying to have sons so that they get the promise, to our knowledge, right? They're trying to have an earthly love from their husband, and God's going to use that but and we'll have to see how that unfolds. But yeah, the promise is kind of going into the background a little bit here, if not disappearing as far as their family priorities and what's on their mind. So yeah, so it's a mess. What is the Lord trying to teach him? You could argue he's not really learning much, but the Lord is trying to teach him. Yeah.
I think he's probably trying to teach him some integrity and honesty. When you think about it, back at Abraham and Sarah, you know, the passing off to let your handmaid have a child in, you know, my name, that didn't go over well, and you would think that story would have been in the family lore, and somebody would have learned from that, but clearly didn't. They're still doing it. And I don't know, I think maybe eventually that Jacob needed to learn some clarity and some integrity, honesty.
Yeah. Maybe he's definitely humbled every day by the dysfunction of his family, right? I think, kind of a side note, maybe culturally, kind of it's amazing that when Bilhah has Dan and Naphtali, you know, Rachel basically says, I've been vindicated, right? I have children now. And so that's a little different than previous generations where the maidservant had children and it was like, well, Ishmael's not mine, and you know, so. But yeah, it's just interesting that because you say, no, Rachel, I mean they're not your kids, you know. God isn't blessing you, but she thinks he is. So, Joan.
I think this was kind of the devil's way of working on these people to try to get them away from the promise in those days. And fortunately, later on in life, Jacob came around.
Yeah. So we know we have to get a great nation, and we didn't expect it this way, right? We didn't expect it to come through sinful issues in a family, but God is gonna work this out for their good, and so it's just well, I guess the next questions kind of touch upon this a little bit more. So. I'll defer to those. So question 2, what does the story of the mandrakes teach us about how God works? I guess you have to.
Use whatever.
We have to make a call on the mandrakes first, I suppose. You know, did they make it happen or did they not? But
I bet there was success sometimes, but I bet it wasn't 100%.
I bet God was in charge all along.
That's right.
okay, yeah.
That's the bit I get.
So either God was in control and these mandrakes helped. You know, she saw the infomercial and then decided to get some mandrakes and they helped, or they were placebos and God was in control anyway and she became pregnant. It is interesting. She gets the mandrakes, but then Leah sleeps with him next. So, you know, she had to wait. She had to put him on the shelf for a night or 5. But yeah, it is one of those things where yeah, we could have multiple wives pregnant at the same time, right? So, I mean, how close all these boys were. Going to be 12 of them. Maybe they're mathematically 7 years apart or something, right? So, Question 3, apply. How do these verses show us that, quote, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose? Romans 8:28. Joe?
Mostly for our good that it worked out. Because when you think of what Jacob's family was like, and that Judah was in the ancestry of Christ, even though I would think Judah was a nasty man, I would, I'd have nothing to do with that guy.
And his name meant praise.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is an interesting thing here because he's not the oldest, but it is going to be through Judah that the Savior is going to come, isn't he? So again, we find these twists and turns where God blesses his people in an unsuspected way. And of course, the life of Joseph and in the Exodus too are going to just going to be how God takes this growing family and puts it on steroids. But you can understand why Joseph becomes the favored son in a bit, right? Because he, in Dad's mind, he's like the firstborn, right? He's the firstborn of the wife I loved and wanted to have a firstborn with anyway. So Joseph is raised not as number 11, but as number 1. And again, that just sets the seeds of his brothers wanting to kill him and then just sending him to Egypt. And the coat is just a symptom of that, right, of the problem. So even among the sons, he's not going to love them, equitably as he should. That's chapter 30. That was like, a good 40 minutes of Jerry Springer, following the family tree here and the drama. I suppose some people don't even know who Jerry Springer is anymore, right? I'm dating myself. Chapter 31. I don't know if there's a good place to start and stop. We could start with the first 21 verses if you like. Or you guys are tired and your mind is just overcome with your family. Well, let's start it there. So Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all his wealth from what belonged to our father. And Jacob noted that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had been. Insert shocked. Yeah, we're shocked. When the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were. He said to them, I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said, the speckled ones will be your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said, the streaked ones will be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock. and has given them to me. In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw that the male goats were mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in a dream, Jacob. I answered, Here I am. And he said, Look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flocks are streaked, speckled, or spotted. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. Then Rachel and Leah replied, Do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So whatever God has told you, so do whatever God has told you. And Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods he had accumulated in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household goods. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had and crossed the river. He headed for the hill country of Gilead. All right. So we get a little bit of a flashback there, right? So God, at some point, sticks or no sticks, he's being told that he's being blessed by God in this process, right? And we find out the wages have been. I guess the deal starts out one way, maybe, but it kept changing. But that was okay. God worked through that. The daughters, what's the attitude of the daughters?
We're out of here.
You know, Dad is a greedy, you know what kind of thing, right?
Oh God.
Yeah, Mr. Burns or Mr. Potter apparently. He's trying to take from you, Jacob, and then what he does have, he's not exactly leaving for us, or so. Yeah, they're behind Jacob. I mean, they all agree on something finally. It sounds like. They haven't been getting along, but now they're a posse of unhappy young adults, and they're going to leave. Joan, comment?
Well, when Abraham's servant went to Laban's family to get a wife for Jacob because he didn't want them worshiping the other gods. Obviously, Laban was more interested in what the neighbors were doing than he was his own family and worshiping the correct God. So, because here it says that Rachel stole Laban's gods, which means he was worshiping idols. He was not worshiping the true God.
Yeah, verse 19, right? Yeah.
So he deserved everything he lost.
And this isn't a case necessarily where I would take it, she wanted to worship them herself. She was plundering him, right? This is her taking her
Was it
dad's
plunder,
gold
or
and silver,
she,
right?
or was she secretly worshiping them too?
Yeah, I don't know. I imagine the Egyptian
Where
later when they plunder the Egyptians, the jewelry isn't always so secular too, right? I mean, I imagine this is just how you stored your wealth, and what you invested in. Apparently, if you're Laban, yeah. So she's stealing. It says, Rachel stole, Jacob deceived. You might say they were put in a no-win situation.
But Laban was absolutely every bit as guilty as what they were. They were playing the same game.
Sure. Yeah. So I don't know, this is not an endorsement for you or anybody else to steal their inheritances. But this is the reality of it. Laban was not going to be fair, so God was going to encourage them to take what was theirs and leave. Yeah. Wayne?
Well, I just thought for the first time, maybe this is Rachel's act of payback or spite for even in the first place selling me to Jacob. And this will hurt, and I'm doing it just to pay back. I don't know. The thought crossed my mind.
That goes back to the fundamental thought. Was selling his daughter a typical thing, or maybe a dowry or something wasn't uncultural or unexpected, but it was extreme. Laban is really seems to, in my estimation, would be just pushing the limits of everything.
Or is it a case of, well, just in case Laban's father's God's work, I'll just take it for that. But she's hiding him, so she knows he's not going to be happy.
Yeah. And at least it says her father's household gods. It wasn't her household gods. And to my knowledge, I don't think these statues or images appear anywhere else later. Or God is like upset that they're worshiping him or something. But yeah, Susan.
The People's Bible says that it is one of two things. She is secretly an idolatress, or some feel that it's the economic significance in possessing her father's gods. I would tend to believe the latter because she ties the two with her inheritance.
Yeah.
She wouldn't call, if she was an idolatress, she wouldn't call that God in an inheritance. So I tend to think it was for the monetary purpose.
Yeah, and even though it's not mentioned, I'm thinking, why does he want to have a son with Rachel so bad? It is the promise at some point in the back of his mind, or if not, something he's talked about. And so I don't know how can you be sitting on the promise of a promised land with your family, and not preach that to your family and your kids, right? I mean, it doesn't even. Even we have it in the dream, right? So he has this really stark reminder. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar. So leave, right? And my God our true God has called us back home, and he tells his family that, and I don't think they run to, oh well, you have your God, Jacob. We're going to get these. Yeah, that just doesn't seem to follow either. So I would think it's very voluntary. Yeah.
I have a note here at the bottom of my EHV Bible. EHV. The teraphim were household idols that may have been associated with inheritance rights to the family property. It's referring to verse 19.
So there's physical items that if you possess, they're kind of like deeds to land or something. Interesting. Yeah. Other thoughts here. So you just get a little bit more clarity on how difficult, how much more unreasonable Laban has been. Ladies are all on board. He fled, crossing the river. He headed toward the country of Gilead. So, it is a leap of faith now. I mean, he wants to go see his dad, but we know who's also over there. Esau. Yeah, that's gonna be an interesting visit. Maybe Esau is going to be interested in some household gods. So yeah, just in the look section there, you have the angel of God. So this was the Lord himself in this case, the Son of God. Jacob's life in Haran had come to an end. It had started with God's promises at Bethel to bring him safely back to Canaan. Now it was ending with God, who identified himself as the God of Bethel. Household gods, they were little images of spirits or deities that were thought to protect specific households. The worship of such spiritual powers is very much alive in our own day. For example, the highly cultured and technologically advanced Japanese have tens of thousands of such household gods. Have you ever seen a little Japanese shrine? Maybe in a temple or even in somebody's house? I remember years ago seeing in a house a little, we would put a bookshelf in that corner of the room, but they had all little figurines and images. And it's like they lived in their little shriny idolatrous temple, and probably much the same here. So I don't know. We put up crosses and pictures on our walls, but I don't know if any of us have a little altar we pray at in our house. Wouldn't be necessarily wrong, but definitely wrong when you have different images and superstitions about false gods. Yeah, Wayne.
Well, Catholics, at least in Bay City, Michigan, have Mary in their gardens for that stuff. But I was thinking of the passage somewhere in Scripture. It says, "To the crafty, God shows himself crafty." In other words, if you think you're foxy, I'm out foxing you. In these deals, Laban moves away, Jacob moves away, they're all moving away. But God's really the one, I'll fool those who are crafty. But to the, I don't know what the terminology is, to the sincere, he shows himself sincere. So you cannot outfox God. And God is going to have his way in the end.
Right, Laban serves a purpose here still, right? It's not like Laban dies from disease and then there's a temptation for Jacob to stay and run things and be the guy. No, he's gonna let Laban, live a bit longer, and Jacob's gonna flee from him, and there's got to be a good reason maybe to get Jacob to go back home. He's been blessed, and the hardest time to change and start over is when things are going well. So Laban becomes the instigator of this earthly drive to leave, let alone the promise that God says this is the real reason. So. Maybe things go poorly sometimes because we need a change. Not always because God's teaching us a lesson. I think the editor of this text is kind of making the both and, right? God, has Jacob struggle so that there will be a change, and maybe he is being a bit chastised for his behavior. But that's where we'll end today. Any burning question or comment? Well, we'll pick up there next week in chapter 31.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him above the heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.